The council chamber of the Intergalactic Alliance was built to inspire awe. Its ceiling stretched higher than any cathedral of old Earth, glowing with lights that resembled drifting stars. Beneath that vast dome, representatives of countless alien races gathered in silence, their strange forms arranged in spiraling tiers of crystal platforms. Some were tall and sharp like walking statues, others shimmered like liquid shadows, and a few floated as luminous clouds of gas. Each voice in that chamber carried the weight of empires that spanned entire galaxies. And yet, when the humans entered, the chamber filled with the quiet sound of disbelief. They were small compared to the towering Serac, fragile compared to the armored Kelnar, and painfully plain beside the radiant Varians. Their uniforms were simple, their ships modest, their weapons crude in the eyes of the galaxy. To most species, the humans were latecomers to the stars, ambitious but unremarkable, reckless dreamers standing among giants. At the center of the chamber stood Captain Mira Hayes, chosen as Earth's representative. She was not the tallest, not the strongest, but she carried herself with steady resolve. Her dark eyes swept across the alien faces above her, meeting every gaze with a calm defiance. Behind her stood Lieutenant Alvarez, thin and sharp-minded, Dr. Imani with her quiet wisdom, and Sergeant Kane, broad-shouldered and watchful. Together they looked like fragile pieces on a vast board of power. From the Serac platform, Ambassador Mai Vale leaned forward, crystalline skin glinting under the chamber lights. His voice rang cold and sharp. "Humans," he said, "you claim a seat among us, yet you have little to offer. Your fleets are small. Your technology is young. Why should we waste our time listening?" Mira did not flinch. She clasped her, hands behind her back, and spoke evenly. "Because survival is not measured by size or age. It is measured by will. And humanity has never surrendered. Not to storm, not to hunger, not to war. We stand here because when the world told us to die, we chose to live." Her words echoed through the chamber. A ripple of murmurs rose among the alien platforms. Some scoffed, others regarded her with curiosity, and a few with the faintest spark of respect. But before another word could be spoken, the chamber darkened. The great display at its heart shimmered to life, revealing a vast star map. Red signals pulsed like wounds across the outer systems, the Dreth swarm. No one needed explanation. Every species knew the name. A tide of bioships, endless and hungry, sweeping through space like locusts. They devoured entire planets, stripping them to bone and dust. For centuries, they had been a nightmare whispered in cautionary tales. Now they were real, and they were advancing. A voice filled the chamber, translated across dozens of tongues. "Colony Thalan Prime has fallen. Civilian losses, total." Silence weighed heavy, as if the chamber itself held its breath. The Dreth had destroyed an entire world in less than a day. Even the strongest fleets had been powerless against their evolving weapons and overwhelming numbers. Ambassador Vale's crystal features hardened. "This proves it. Resistance is hopeless. We must retreat deeper into the core systems." Others agreed. Fear flickered in the voices of empires once thought unshakable. Some argued for barricades, some for abandoning the outer colonies. The mighty alliance, guardians of hundreds of civilizations, seemed ready to collapse under its own terror. It was then that Mira Hayes stepped forward. Her voice was quiet, but it carried like steel across the hall. "Hopeless? No. That word does not exist for us." The alien counselors turned toward her, some with disbelief, some with impatience. Mira's gaze fixed on the glowing map. "Every empire here has strength beyond imagining. Yet strength alone has failed you. The Dreth adapt, they overwhelm, they consume. But humans, we adapt too. Not with size or firepower, but with creativity, with stubbornness, with the refusal to accept defeat. We have faced impossible odds before. We do not run. We endure. Her crew watched her, pride stirring in their chests. Sergeant Kane's fists clenched in silent agreement. Dr. Imani's eyes glimmered with quiet conviction. Even Alvarez, usually skeptical, allowed the faintest smile. But Vale only laughed, the sound sharp and echoing. You are children playing. With fire. Your words are bold, but boldness does not win wars. Mira turned her eyes to him, steady and unshaken. No, she said, but courage does, and humanity has that in endless supply. The chamber grew restless again. Some dismissed her, others whispered of possibilities. No decision was made, but seeds had been planted. Later, as Mira and her team walked out of the towering halls, the weight of the galaxy pressed upon them. Kane muttered, "They don't believe in us." Mira paused beneath the wide glass roof, where the stars stretched endless and cold. "They don't have to," she said, "because when the sky burns, belief won't matter. Only what we do will." And, as the Dreth swarm drew closer, hungry for worlds yet untouched, humanity prepared to write its first true chapter among the stars. A chapter not of weakness, but of defiance. A story the galaxy would never forget. The Dreth swarm moved like a living storm through the stars. From a distance, their fleets looked like dark rivers of shadow crawling across the void, blotting out starlight as they advanced. They were not ships built with steel and engines, but vast creatures of flesh and bone, shaped by some ancient hunger. Their hulls pulsed like living skin, and their weapons grew from them like claws and fangs. Each battle they fought, they learned. Each defense they shattered. They evolved. World after world fell. Entire skies were silenced. Refugees scattered into deep space, carrying stories of fire and screams that echoed in the cold. In the council chambers, fear thickened like smoke. Some argued for peace talks, though none had ever spoken with the Dreth. Others whispered about abandoning entire regions to save the core worlds. Captain Mira Hayes sat in silence, her jaw tight as she listened to alien leaders debate survival, like merchants haggling over scraps. Finally, Admiral Corrin of the Kelnar rose. His body was plated with silver armor that shimmered under the chamber's light. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. Our fleets have fought them and lost. The Dreth grow stronger with every battle. We cannot match them ship for ship. To resist is to waste lives. A wave of agreement rolled through the chamber. It felt like a surrender. Mira leaned forward, her voice cut through the noise. Then don't fight them ship for ship. The room stilled. Dozens of alien eyes fixed on her. She stood, her figure small against the towering platforms, but her words carried weight. Humanity has never had the biggest armies. We never had the sharpest blades or the strongest armor. What we had was imagination. We learned to fight smarter, not harder. We turned weakness into weapons. If we can't match the Dreth's numbers, then we'll outthink them. Her words sparked murmurs. Some were curious, others dismissive. Ambassador. Vale's crystalline body caught the light as he sneered. And what tricks will your fragile species invent? You cannot hope to defeat an enemy that devours entire planets. Mira's answer was calm, but her eyes burned. Every predator has a weakness. The bigger they are, the more blind they become. You see, the Dreth consume everything. But that hunger, it can be used against them. The council gave her no formal command. They gave her nothing but silence. But Mira did not wait for permission. Aboard the human frigate Dauntless, her crew prepared. The ship was old by Alliance standards, angular hull, patched plating, engines that roared louder than they should. To most aliens, it was outdated. To humans, it was home. Lieutenant Alvarez hunched over glowing tactical maps. His sharp eyes traced patterns in Dreth movements. They swarm in waves, Captain, always rushing toward the largest source of energy. It's instinct, like moths, to a flame. Then we'll give them a flame, Mira replied. Dr. Imani adjusted her lenses, studying biological readings. They grow stronger with every ship they devour. But if we trick them into consuming what we choose... She paused. Realization dawning. We can poison their hunger. Sergeant Kane leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed. Sounds dangerous. Exactly our kind of fight. Their first mission came sooner than expected. A Dreth fleet moved against the colony of HFY, a lush green world with floating oceans and silver forests. Millions lived there, unaware the swarm had already crossed the outer defenses. The Council had no ships to spare. They wrote the colony off as lost. But Mira Hayes did not. Plot a course, she ordered. We'll hold them as long as we can. The Dauntless dropped out of hyperspace above HFY. The sight made even hardened soldiers catch their breath. The Dreth were already descending, monstrous shadows blotting out the planet's glow. Their ships pulsed with alien life, their hulls dripping with molten plasma as they prepared to strike. The humans were outnumbered 100-1. Mira stood on the command deck, her voice steady. Alvarez, scramble the decoys. Kane, prepare the rail batteries. Imani, I need every reading you can get on their movement. The human frigate dove into the chaos. Small, fragile, insignificant against the tide. But unlike the heavy alien warships, the Dauntless moved like a knife. It weaved between Dreth monstrosities, leaving trails of false signals and bursts of reactor heat. The swarm followed, confused by the sudden flood of energy. Some broke formation, others collided in. Their frenzy to chase the false flames. Look at them, Alvarez whispered, eyes wide. They're taking the bait. Rail cannons roared, not at the Dreth directly, but at the massive asteroids drifting above the planet. Rocks shattered into fragments, creating a storm of debris that ripped into the swarm's living hulls. Screeches echoed through space as Dreth ships convulsed, wounded not by superior firepower, but by human cunning. On the colony below, civilians watched the sky blaze with fire. They expected silence to follow, expected death. Instead, they saw a lone ship darting like a spark through the dark, holding back the nightmare. For the first time, a Dreth fleet faltered. Hours later, battered and scarred, the Dauntless limped away. They had not destroyed the swarm, but they had delayed it. More importantly, they had saved lives. Mira stood at the viewport, watching the stars. Her crew gathered behind her, exhausted but alive. They'll come again, Kane said. They always do, Mira answered. But now the galaxy knows they can bleed. In the silence that followed, hope flickered. Small, fragile, but alive. Like humanity itself. And for the first time, the galaxy began to whisper. Perhaps these fragile humans were not so fragile after all. The news of HFY spread quickly across the stars. Whispers echoed in every chamber, every council hall, every refugee ship. For the first time in living memory, the Dreth had been forced to retreat, even if only for a short while. And it was. Not the mighty Serac or the armored Kelnar who had stood against them, it was the humans. But the whispers carried doubt as well. Many alien leaders claimed it was a fluke, a moment of luck that could not be repeated. Some even accused humanity of recklessness, endangering everyone with foolish stunts. To the Council, one small victory did not matter in a war that threatened galaxies. Captain Mira Hayes heard these voices. She listened in silence as Ambassador Vale mocked her efforts in front of the chamber. Do not mistake desperation for strategy, he declared, crystalline skin gleaming under the lights. The Dreth cannot be defeated with tricks. Humanity tempts fate, and fate always punishes arrogance. Mira did not answer him. Her silence was heavier than words. Later, aboard the Dauntless, her crew gathered in the dim glow of the strategy room. The atmosphere was heavy. Alvarez studied the tactical maps, his brow furrowed. "He's not wrong," Alvarez muttered. "We delayed them, but they're still coming. Every day we wait, they grow stronger, and we're running on scraps." Kane slammed his fist against the table. "So what? We sit and wait to die? No, we fight, even if the council won't stand with us." Dr. Imani adjusted her glasses, her voice calm but firm. "Hope is fragile, Captain. One victory lit a spark. But if we fall too soon, that spark dies with us." Mira looked at each of them in turn, her voice steady. "Then we don't fall. We take that spark and turn it into fire. The Dreth believe themselves unstoppable. The Council believes we are weak. Let's prove them both wrong." The next mission came without warning. A message reached them from the mining colony of Vera 9, a world scarred by deserts and burning winds. Thousands of workers had no fleet to defend them. The Dreth swarm was approaching, its shadow already visible in the skies. The council debated endlessly but gave no answer. For them, Vera 9 was a minor world, not worth the risk of fleets already stretched thin. Mira stood in the chamber as the arguments dragged on. Her patience ended. "If you won't defend them," she said, her voice echoing through the hall, "then humanity will." The chamber erupted in outrage, but Mira turned and walked out without waiting for approval. The Dauntless arrived in orbit above Vera 9 as the swarm descended. Dust storms raged across the surface, whipping the desert into a sea of golden waves. Beneath the storm, miners huddled in bunkers praying for a miracle. The Dreth came like a tide, their living ships spreading across the sky. Their bodies glowed with sickly green light, their weapons pulsing with plasma veins. Against them, the lone human frigate seemed like an insect before a hurricane. On the command deck, Alvarez spoke quickly, his voice sharp. "They're scanning for the colony's power grid. That's their target." Mira's eyes narrowed. "Then we give them something else to chase." Kane grinned fiercely. "Bait." The Dauntless powered up its engines to full, releasing an energy surge so massive that the Dreth instantly shifted focus. Like predators sensing blood, the swarm lunged toward the human ship. "Now!" Mira ordered. Decoys launched into the storm, scattering across the desert. They burned bright false signatures of energy that drew Dreth ships lower and lower into the atmosphere. As they pursued, the storm swallowed them. Lightning cracked, winds tore at their hulls, and sand slashed against their living skin. Imani monitored the readings. "They're confused. Their senses are overwhelmed. The storm blinds them." "Use it," Mira said. Kane targeted the weakest ships, firing rail cannons from within the storm itself. The shots pierced through their soft underbellies, tearing them apart before they could adapt. One by one, Dreth fell burning into the desert, their monstrous bodies crashing into the dunes. From below, the miners saw streaks of fire raining from the sky. They thought the heavens themselves were defending them. They cheered, voices echoing through the underground shelters. But the fight was not without cost. The Dauntless shuddered under a heavy blow as a Dreth ship latched onto its hull, clawing with molten tendrils. Alarm screamed. Sparks burst across the deck. "Kane!" Mira shouted. The sergeant rushed to the weapons console, overriding safety locks. The frigate's ventral guns roared point-blank into the creature's core. The Dreth shrieked, tearing, away before exploding in a burst of green fire. The shockwave threw the ship into the storm, but Alvarez wrestled the controls, sweat dripping down his face. "Hold together, you stubborn machine! Hold!" Against all odds, the Dauntless broke free of the storm's grasp. Behind it, half the swarm burned across the desert, the rest retreating in disarray. Vera 9 was safe. When the council received the report, silence filled the chamber. 2 colonies had been saved by humans. The word spread faster than light. Refugees whispered the name Dauntless. Children painted crude human ships on walls of shelters. For the first time, fear of the breath was matched by stories of defiance. Still, doubt remained. Vale stood in the chamber, his crystalline body rigid with pride. Temporary victories, he insisted. Nothing more. The humans gamble with fate. One day, they will lose. But even as he spoke, the stars themselves seemed to carry another story, a story of fire, steel, and relentless will, and in quiet corners of the galaxy, hope was beginning to awaken. The Dauntless drifted in orbit above Vera 9, its battered hull scarred from the storm and the Dreth's claws. Patches of molten metal still glowed where plasma had burned through. Inside, the air smelled of smoke and sweat, but the crew's eyes shone with something stronger than exhaustion: pride. They had survived again. They had saved thousands. But Captain Mira Hayes did not allow herself the comfort of pride. She stood at the wide viewport, staring at the stars beyond the desert planet. Her reflection looked tired, her shoulders heavy. She thought of the next swarm, of the next colony, of how endless this war seemed. Sergeant Kane entered quietly. His uniform was scorched, one arm wrapped in bandages, but his stride was firm. He looked at Mira and gave a small smile. "You should rest, Captain. Even iron breaks if it's pushed too far." Mira shook her head. "I'll rest when they stop coming." Kane sighed, leaning against the bulkhead. "I know the Council doubts us. I know the galaxy doesn't believe in us. But out there," he nodded toward the planet below, "those miners, those families, they believe now. We gave them something no one else would." For a moment, Mira allowed herself to smile. Hope. Meanwhile, across the stars, the Dreth prepared. They were not mindless beasts, as many had thought. They were a hive of intelligence, ancient and patient. Deep within their living flagships, their cores pulsed with strange thought patterns. They remembered the small ship that had defied them twice. They adapted, they planned, and they were coming. When the Dauntless returned to the Alliance Council, the chamber stirred with uneasy energy. News of Vera 9 had already spread. Refugees praised the humans. Smaller colonies began to whisper requests for their help instead of waiting for the larger fleets. Humanity, once ignored, was now seen as something dangerous, not because of power, but because of spirit. Ambassador Vale rose again, crystalline features hard as stone. "Do not be fooled. These victories are small, temporary. The Dreth are infinite. Every battle only makes them stronger. And every time the humans gamble, they risk drawing the swarm closer to us all." Mira stood before the council. Her voice was calm but carried steel. "Risk is the only path left to us. You've tried your strength and it failed. You've tried your numbers and they broke. Humanity offers something different. Not bigger guns, but sharper minds. Not heavier fleets, but hearts that do not surrender." Some of the chamber remained cold, but others began to shift. Admiral Corrin of the Kelnar leaned forward, his armored jaw tightening. "You speak of fire, Captain. But fire burns out quickly. Tell us, how long can your fragile species endure?" Mira looked straight into his eyes. "As long as it takes." Back. Aboard the Dauntless, plans were drawn. Alvarez studied Dreth attack routes, mapping them like rivers flowing across the stars. His thin fingers traced the patterns, searching for weaknesses. "They strike at resources," he said. "Energy cores, supply depots, food reserves. They consume to grow." Imani adjusted her data streams, her eyes sharp behind her lenses. "Which means if we feed them something poisoned, something they can't adapt to, we could wound them deeply." Kane frowned. "Poison a swarm that eats planets? Sounds like trying to poison a firestorm." But Mira's voice was steady. "Then we find the fuel that burns them." Their chance came at the world of Lorraine, a jewel of oceans and floating cities. The Dreth swarmed toward it, their numbers so vast that even the Serac fleets dared not intercept. The Council prepared to abandon it, as they had so many others, but the humans did not. The Dauntless arrived ahead of the swarm. Mira stood on the deck watching the great blue planet below. "Millions live here," she said softly, "and the Council has already written them off. We will not." Alvarez adjusted the tactical grid. "The Dreth are days away. If we want a chance, we have to prepare now." And so they did. The crew worked without rest. They scattered sensor buoys through the ocean currents, filling the seas with false energy signatures. They rigged old mining satellites to explode with bursts of radiation, powerful enough to blind Dreth senses. They lured the colony's engineers into building strange devices that even they did not fully understand. It was madness. It was desperate. It was human. The Dreth arrived like a black tide, blotting out the stars as their monstrous bodies descended upon Lore. Their shrieks echoed across the void as they prepared to strike. But as they drew near, the seas below came alive with energy. From orbit, it looked as though the oceans themselves were burning with strange light. The swarm broke apart, chasing the false signals. They plunged into the water, crashing through waves in search of prey that did not exist. And when they did, the ocean erupted. Mining satellites detonated, releasing radiation bursts that sliced through the Dreth's sensory organs. Blind and thrashing, they turned on one another in confusion. The false signals lured them deeper, until the ocean became a graveyard of their own making. From the cities above, civilians watched as the sea burned with alien fire, as monsters that had devoured worlds tore themselves apart beneath the waves. "On the command deck of the Dauntless," Mira whispered. "Not unbreakable after all." When the swarm finally retreated, Lore still stood. Its oceans were scarred, its skies burned, but its people were alive. The galaxy trembled at the news. 3 victories. 3 times the humans had done what greater powers would not. Ambassador Vale fumed, his crystal body flickering with sharp cracks. "They play with chaos. They cannot win forever." But Admiral Corrin spoke at last, his armored voice deep. "Perhaps chaos is exactly what we need." For the first time, humanity was no longer dismissed. They were no longer background noise in the Council's chamber. They were fire in the dark, small, fragile, but impossible to ignore. And as the Dreth gathered their strength for an even greater assault, one truth began to spread like a spark through every corner of the galaxy. When hope seemed lost, it was humanity that refused to let the fire die. The Dauntless floated in orbit above Lore, its battered hull reflecting the light of the planet's twin moons. Inside the ship, exhaustion hung in the air. The crew had not slept properly in days. Bruises, burns, and scars covered them, but their spirits burned bright. They had done the impossible again. Yet Mira Hayes could not find rest. She stood alone in the observation bay, her gaze locked on the endless ocean world below. Waves glittered in the moonlight. Calm now, but she could still hear the echoes of battle in her mind. The screams of the Dreth, the explosions beneath, the sea, the desperate cries of her crew. Humanity had saved another world, but each victory came at a price. Every time they fought, the Dauntless came back weaker, and the Dreth, they were learning too. Sergeant Kane entered the bay quietly. His uniform was torn at the shoulder, his face smudged with ash. He leaned against the railing beside Mira. "You're thinking too much, Captain." Mira gave a small, tired smile. "That's my job." Kane looked out at the planet below. "We keep fighting. We keep winning. But how long until the ship falls apart around us? How long until the Council finally decides we're more trouble than we're worth?" Mira did not answer right away. She simply stared at the stars. Finally, she said softly, "As long as we keep standing, Kane. That's enough." In the council chamber, the victories of humanity were impossible to ignore. The whispers had grown louder. Some leaders now argued that humans brought hope, that their tactics, though reckless, worked. Others insisted it was all chance, a series of accidents that would end in disaster. Ambassador Vale's voice rang out above the debates, sharp as broken glass. They are dangerous. Every time they fight, they provoke the Dreth further. Humanity's arrogance will doom us all. But Admiral Corrin of the Kelnar slammed a heavy-armored fist against the platform. Enough. You fear them because they succeed where we failed. The swarm bleeds. I saw it with my own eyes. The humans have shown us a path we refuse to see. The chamber fell silent. For the first time, the council was divided not between retreat or surrender, but between fear and faith. Back on the Dauntless, the crew gathered in the strategy room. Alvarez leaned over the glowing star charts, his thin face pale from exhaustion. The Dreth have shifted their movements. They're avoiding ocean worlds now. They're learning. Dr. Imani tapped her data console, her eyes sharp behind her lenses. They adapt quickly. Every time we wound them, they change. If we don't stay ahead, we'll lose the advantage. Mira studied the map. The red swarm markers were spreading, like cracks across glass, inching closer to the core worlds where the Council held its strongest fleets. But strength had failed before. They think we're reckless, Mira said, her voice low but firm. Maybe they're right, but reckless is better than dead. If we can keep them off balance, if we can show the galaxy they're not invincible, maybe others will rise with us. Kane crossed his arms, nodding. So we don't just fight. We teach them how to fight like us. Mira looked at her crew, tired, bruised but burning with determination. Yes, if humanity is fire, then we'll spread it. Their next mission was not one they chose, but one forced upon them. A council transmission arrived. A Dreth fleet was moving toward the crystal world of Saraka, home world of the Serac. For centuries, Saraka had been untouchable, its crystalline towers glittering under 3 suns. Now, the swarm threatened to shatter it into silence. The Serac, proud and unbending, had no choice but to call for help. When Mira entered the council chamber, Vale's crystalline body flickered with unease. His voice trembled, though he tried to hide it. You saved Lorray. You saved Vera 9. If you will, protect Saraka. For the first time, the Serac bowed his head. Mira's reply was steady. We'll stand where others fall, the boy. Dauntless raced toward Saraka. As they approached, the sight stole the crew's breath. The planet glimmered like a jewel in the void, its surface covered in towering crystal spires that stretched toward the heavens, each one humming faintly with energy. Light refracted through the atmosphere, painting the world in colors no human eye had ever seen before. But beauty was shadowed by terror. The Dreth swarm hung above the planet, blotting out its suns. The bioships moved like predators, circling prey, their claws glowing, their bodies pulsing with hunger. Alvarez whispered, "That's not a fleet. It's a nightmare." Mira's jaw tightened. "Then let's wake them from it. The battle for Saraka was unlike any before." The Dauntless darted between crystal towers, using their resonance to scatter Dreth signals. Kane's guns fired in bursts, collapsing spires to crush bioships below. Imani redirected the planet's natural energy fields, turning them into dazzling beams that blinded the swarm. The Serac fleets, inspired by the humans, fought differently too. For the first time, they broke from rigid formations, moving unpredictably, improvising like Mira had taught them. They fought not like machines, but like survivors. And together, they held the line. The Dreth shrieked as their ships cracked against Saraka's towers. The skies lit with explosions, green fire against the planet's shimmering glow. Civilians, on the surface wept as they watched, because for the first time their home was not abandoned. When the last Dreth retreated, Soraka still stood. Its towers bore scars, its skies were darkened, but its heart remained unbroken. In the council chamber, silence reigned. No one mocked humanity now, no one doubted. Even Ambassador Vale bowed his crystalline head in respect. Mira stood at the center, weary but unshaken. Her voice was quiet, but every word struck like iron. You see now, we are not the strongest. We are not the oldest. But when the storm comes, we do not bow. We burn. And across the galaxy, from hidden colonies to ancient empires, the whispers spread louder than ever. The humans had become more than survivors. They had become a fire the darkness could not extinguish. The galaxy was no longer silent about humanity. Whispers turned into echoes, and echoes into voices. The victories at Lore and Soraka had shown something the Alliance had long forgotten: hope. But hope was dangerous, for it made the enemy notice. The Dreth had always been terrifying, a tide that devoured everything. Yet now, after repeated defeats, they grew furious. Their swarm shifted, gathering strength. Entire clusters of stars went dark as they moved. Worlds that once thought themselves safe now trembled, and the humans, still underestimated by many, suddenly stood at the very center of the storm. Aboard the Dauntless, Mira Hayes stood in the command room as the holographic map burned red with Dreth movements. Alvarez traced his finger across the glowing trails of destruction. His voice was tight. They're not spreading randomly anymore. They're hunting. And it looks like... He paused, dread in his eyes. They're coming. Straight for us. The room fell silent. Kane cursed under his breath, pacing. They want revenge. They've had enough of us cutting their claws. Dr. Imani adjusted her console. It's not only revenge, they're adapting again. Each time we win, they learn. They're treating us as a threat now, not an annoyance. Mira's jaw clenched. She could feel the weight pressing on her chest, the responsibility heavier than ever. Then we do what we've always done. We fight. The council, meanwhile, was in chaos. Reports of Dreth fleets moving in terrifying coordination reached every corner of the chamber. Ambassadors shouted, some blaming humans for drawing too much attention, others demanding more human leadership in battle. Ambassador Vale's crystalline form flickered with anger. This is what we feared. Humanity has provoked the swarm's wrath. They will not stop until the humans are erased. But Admiral Corrin of the Kelnar rose, towering over the chamber. His voice boomed like thunder. No. The swarm was always coming. Humanity did not create this fire. They showed us how to stand in it. Without them, Soraka would already be dust. Without them, we would all be running. For the first time, the chamber erupted not into argument, but into determination. The Alliance began to shift, slowly, toward unity. On the Dauntless, preparations filled every corner of the ship. Mechanics worked without sleep, patching holes in the hull. Soldiers sharpened their weapons, though they all knew steel meant little, against the Dreth. Every crew member moved with a strange mixture of fear and pride. Kane stood with a squad in the hangar, his voice hard but steady. We are the line. Remember that. They can tear ships apart, but they can't tear our will. Hold it together, and we'll give them hell. Alvarez, hunched over his maps, whispered to Mira in private. I don't think they're just after us. They're striking toward Terra. The word hit Mira like a blade. Earth. Home. The planet where it all began, where humanity's first sparks still burned. If the Dreth reached Earth, it would not just be another battle. It would be an ending. The swarm arrived sooner than expected. The blackness of space rippled, and hundreds of Dreth bioships poured out like a flood. Their bodies pulsed with green veins of light, their claws glowing with terrible heat. They surrounded the Dauntless and the few allied ships that had joined. Her. Kane gripped the rail. That's not a fleet. That's a storm. Mira gave one order. Then we hold the line until the galaxy learns how to fight a storm. The battle erupted in fire. The Dauntless darted through enemy lines, her guns roaring. Kane fired with precision, every shot aimed at a weak spot, every explosion tearing holes in the swarm. Alvarez fed coordinates into Mira's console, predicting movements a second before they happened. Dr. Imani rerouted power through the damaged core, forcing the ship to burn brighter, faster, harder than it was ever designed to. Sparks rained from the ceiling. The hull groaned, but the Dauntless refused to fall. Allied ships, inspired by humanity's defiance, fought with a new ferocity. The Kelnar broke formation, charging straight into the swarm as humans had taught them. The Serac used their crystal harmonics to disrupt Dreth signals, something they had once thought too chaotic. For the first time, the swarm met not prey, but predators. But the Dreth were cunning. In the middle of the fight, a massive shape tore through the darkness, a colossal bioship unlike any they had seen before. Its body stretched like a living fortress, covered in thick carapace. Energy pulsed inside it like a beating heart. Alvarez's voice cracked. That thing's heading toward Earth. The crew froze. It wasn't after them. It was using the battle as a distraction. Mira's throat tightened. Images of her home world filled her mind. Oceans, forests, the blue skies of her childhood. She could not let that light be snuffed out. We can't let it through, she whispered. Kane's eyes widened. Captain, that thing's too big. Even if we hit. With everything. Mira turned to him, her voice steel. Then we hit it harder. The Dauntless broke from the fight, engines screaming. Dreth ships swarmed after it, claws tearing through the void. Kane blasted them aside, Alvarez shouted directions, and Imani pushed the ship far past its limits. The colossal bioship loomed ahead, its heartbeat-like glow filling the darkness. Mira knew the Dauntless could not survive a direct attack, but survival had never been the goal. Line up the shot, she said quietly. Alvarez hesitated. Captain, you're talking about ramming it. Her eyes burned. I'm talking about saving Earth. The crew fell silent. Then, one by one, they nodded. Not out of duty, but out of love, for each other, for their world, for all worlds that deserved a chance to live. The Dauntless raced toward the monster, a lone spark against a sea of darkness. The galaxy watched. Allies held their breath. Even the council chambers went silent as news spread, for in that moment humanity did not run. Humanity did not beg. Humanity burned. The Dauntless struck the bioship like a spear of fire. The explosion lit the void brighter than a star, ripping through the beast's core. Shockwaves shattered Dreth formations. The swarm shrieked in fury, then faltered, scattering into chaos. And when the light faded, silence remained. The Dauntless was gone. Across the galaxy, people wept. But they did not weep only for loss. They wept for the fire that refused to die, for the spark that spread into every heart. Even in destruction, humanity had done what no other could. They had given the galaxy courage. And the swarm, for the first time in memory, retreated. The legend of humanity grew brighter still. The galaxy did not forget the day the Dauntless burned brighter than a star. Stories of that sacrifice traveled faster than light. From the frozen moons of Soraka to the crystalline towers of Vale, from the deepest mining colonies to the great halls of the council, one message echoed: humanity does not break. Humanity burns. In the council chamber, silence lingered long after the reports came. The Dreth, for the first time in centuries, had retreated. The swarm was wounded, shaken. No one had thought it possible. Ambassador Vale's crystalline body glowed faintly, trembling with words. They destroyed the monster with nothing but steel and fire. They gave their lives. Admiral Corrin of the Kelnar spoke with pride, rumbling in his chest. No, they gave us something greater than their lives. They gave us belief. Look around you. Every world watches. Every species feels it. If humanity can bleed for the galaxy, then so can we. For the first time, the chamber filled not with arguments, but with unity. But not all humans were gone. Far from the blast zone, fragments of the Dauntless drifted, broken metal scattered across the stars, and within one emergency pod, a faint light blinked. Inside, Mira Hayes gasped awake. Her lungs burned, her body bruised, but she was alive. She looked around at the faces near her. Kane was unconscious, blood on his brow. Alvarez sat slumped, his breathing shallow but steady. Dr. Imani stirred, her hand still gripping a data pad, as if she refused to die without holding knowledge. Mira's throat tightened. Against all odds, the heart of the Dauntless still beat. The pod drifted for days, hidden in the debris field. They had little food, little water, and no guarantee of rescue. But they had something far stronger, each other. Kane was the first to fully wake. His eyes flickered, then focused on Mira. "Captain, we did it, didn't we?" Her voice shook, but she nodded. "We did. Earth is safe, for now." He let out a tired laugh. "Then I don't mind dying out here." "No one's dying," Mira said firmly, even though fear gnawed at her. "Not while I'm still breathing." Dr. Imani coughed, her voice weak but determined. "If the swarm scattered, search teams will come. We just need to hold on." Alvarez, barely able to lift, his head whispered, "Hold on, it's what we do best." Meanwhile, across human space, Earth itself felt the shock of what had happened. For centuries, humanity had been dismissed, underestimated, even pitied. Now, every child, every worker, every soldier looked up at the sky with new fire in their hearts. On Terra, people lit candles across cities. In the domes of Mars, miners sang songs of defiance. On Luna's gray surface, soldiers raised banners of the Dauntless, painting her name on their armor. Humanity was no longer a silent member of the Alliance. They were its heartbeat. But the Dreth were not gone. In the dark reaches of space, the swarm gathered. Their retreat was not defeat, it was fury. The destruction of their massive bioship left scars that pulsed with rage. Their hive minds boiled with hatred, and they whispered one word across: the void. Humanity. They had learned to fear it, and they would come again. Back in the drifting pod, time grew heavy. Kane grew restless. Alvarez weaker, Imani quieter. Mira sat awake when the others slept, staring into the endless stars. Doubts pressed on her. Was their sacrifice only temporary? Would the swarm return stronger than ever? But then she remembered the faces of those who had looked to her for hope. The miners on Mars, the children of Earth, the soldiers who had stood beside her. She clenched her fists. No matter what comes, she whispered into the silence, humanity will rise. Salvation came on the 10th day. A shadow fell over the pod and lights pierced the darkness. A Serac rescue ship, drawn by faint signals, locked onto their pod. The doors opened, and crystal figures reached out their hands. "You are not alone," the Serac said softly. "Not anymore." Mira almost collapsed from relief, tears burning her eyes. The crew of the Dauntless was pulled aboard, alive, though scarred forever. The galaxy that had mourned them now gasped in awe. Humanity's fire still burned. When news spread that the heroes had survived, the Alliance trembled with joy. Mira, Kane, Alvarez, and Imani became symbols, not just of courage, but of survival. Against all odds, every race began to prepare, no longer out of fear, but with determination. The council named them the Keepers of the Flame. Yet Mira knew the truth. This was not the end. The Dreth would return, stronger, darker, hungrier. Their hatred would not fade. But humanity had done something no other species had achieved. They had made the swarm hesitate, and hesitation was the first crack in the darkness. On the balcony of the Serac capital, Mira stood with her surviving crew. The stars stretched before them, cold and endless, but she no longer saw emptiness. She saw battlefields waiting for courage. She saw worlds waiting for defenders. She saw a galaxy that finally understood the power of a fragile, stubborn species called human. Kane placed his hand on her shoulder. "What now, Captain?" Mira's lips curved into a small, fierce smile. "Now? Now we teach the galaxy how to fight." Far away, in the hidden depths of the swarm, a new kind of roar echoed. The Dreth were coming, but this time, the galaxy would not face them in fear. This time, they would face them with humanity's fire, and the flame that would not die was only growing stronger. The galaxy began to breathe again, but it was not the calm of peace. It was the deep, nervous silence before a storm. Every race knew the Dreth would come back, stronger than before, and in that silence, all eyes turned to humanity. Mira Hayes stood in the council chamber once again, her uniform worn but her spirit unbroken. The survivors of the Dauntless stood beside her, Kane, Alvarez, and Dr. Imani. Around them, the alien leaders filled the vast hall, shimmering Serac, towering Kelnar, the winged Liari, and dozens more. For centuries, these races had argued over who held power, but now they waited for Mira to speak. A human, once dismissed as too young a species, now carried their hopes. Mira looked up at the stars glittering through the chamber's transparent dome. She took a breath. The Dreth will return. They know fear now, and fear makes them dangerous. We must prepare, not as many worlds, but as one. Her voice was steady, but her words burned. The Serac leader leaned forward, his crystalline body shimmering like starlight. "And humanity? You will lead this?" Mira's hands tightened. She thought of Earth, still scarred from wars long past. She thought of Mars, where miners sang songs under red skies. She thought of Luna's banners raised high. Humanity had been underestimated for too long. "Yes," she said firmly. "We will not hide. We will lead." In the months that followed, the galaxy changed. For the first time, the Alliance trained as one army. On the frozen fields of Seraca, human soldiers drilled alongside Liari flyers, learning how to fight in air and ice. On the seas of Vale, submarines of Earth moved with crystal Serac vessels, combining sonar with resonance waves. On Kelnar's deserts, human engineers taught warriors how to fight with guerrilla tactics, hit, fade, and strike again. Everywhere, the humans brought something the other species had lost long ago: improvisation, stubbornness, and fire. Kane became a trainer, teaching alien troops how to fight with limited weapons and impossible odds. "You don't need perfection," he told them, his voice sharp. "You need grit. You need to fight until the last breath." Alvarez worked with engineers from across the galaxy, his hands black with grease as he merged alien technology with human scrap. "Your machines are beautiful," he laughed, "but sometimes ugly works better." Soon fleets were outfitted with hybrid weapons, half alien elegance, half human steel. Dr. Imani moved from world to world, spreading knowledge. She shared human medicine, survival methods, and even old stories of Earth's history. Around her, alien children listened with wide eyes as she told of humanity's long struggles. Plagues, wars, and famines survived. "We endure," she said softly, "because we never learned how to quit." But not everyone trusted humanity. In the shadowed corners of the council, whispers grew. Some feared giving humans too much power, others doubted they could truly hold against the swarm, and some some planned betrayal. On the dark world of Clith, where politics was a poison, an alien envoy spoke in secret to Dreth shadows. "We cannot stop them," the envoy hissed. "But humanity cannot be allowed to rise above us. Strike at them first, before they become legends." The Dreth listened, their high voices echoing like blades. For the first time, the swarm did not only plan conquest. They planned revenge. Back on Earth, Mira stood on the cliffs of the Atlantic, staring at the restless sea. She remembered the night sky burning, the Dauntless tearing through the swarm. She remembered the faces of those who never returned. Kane joined her, carrying 2 mugs of steaming tea. "You're thinking too much again," he said with a tired smile. "I'm thinking just enough," Mira replied. She watched the waves crash, endless and relentless. "The Dreth won't wait long. They'll hit us where we're weakest." Kane sipped his tea, his eyes on the horizon. "Then we don't give them a weakness." Mira's heart tightened. She knew the truth. No army, no fleet, no planet was unbreakable. But what made humanity different was not perfection. It was the refusal to surrender, no matter how broken they became. Training camps burned with energy. Fleets patrolled the edge of known space. Signals pulsed from star to star, building a network of warning and defense. Yet even as hope grew, dread lurked like a shadow. One night, in the deep void beyond the rim, a scout fleet vanished. No distress call, no wreckage, just silence. When the news reached the council, fear spread. The Dreth were moving again. Mira called her crew together in the strategy chamber of the Serac capital. The stars glowed on the holographic map, each light a fragile world. "They're testing us," Mira said. "They want to see how much fear we'll show before they strike." Alvarez clenched his fists. "Then let's show them fire instead." Dr. Imani's voice was quiet, but steady. "If they come again, it won't be like before. They'll adapt, they'll evolve. They always do." Mira nodded. "So will we. That's the only reason we've survived this long." Kane grinned, sharp and fierce. "Then it's time we remind the galaxy who taught survival to the stars." Outside the chamber, a storm brewed in the endless dark. The Dreth were coming, and this time they would not only come for conquest. They would come for vengeance. But humanity stood ready. Not perfect, not invincible, but unbreakable. The stars themselves seemed to wait, holding their breath for the fire to return. The silence of the galaxy ended with fire. The Dreth returned, not in whispers, but in storms. Their ships poured from the void, black as shadows, endless in number. Worlds trembled as their hives opened, flooding skies with swarms of living metal. In the council chamber, alarms thundered. Leaders shouted, fleets scrambled, and the air tasted of panic. But amid the chaos, Mira Hayes stood calm, her eyes cold as steel. "They're here," she said softly. "And this time, they want to erase us all." The first blow fell on the planet Liara. Once a shining world of silver towers and winged skies, it became a battlefield of fire. Dreth ships carved through defenses, wings of flame spreading across the horizon. The Liari fought bravely, but their cries echoed across the void. Mira and her crew aboard the flagship Unity rushed to the scene. As they emerged from hyperspace, the sight struck them silent. Cities burning, fleets scattered, and the swarm consuming the sky. Kane's fists clenched. "They're tearing it apart," Alvarez's voice shook with fury. "Then we tear them back." Mira's hand tightened on the controls. "All ships, form with us. Hold the line. Humanity doesn't break." The battle was chaos. Human and alien ships flew side by side, firing into the endless swarm. Missiles streaked through the void, beams of energy sliced the dark. Kane's fighter squadron darted between Dreth monstrosities, striking at their weak points. Alvarez shouted commands to engineers, patching weapons in the middle of fire. Dr. Imani moved among the wounded, her hands steady, though her heart bled at every cry. She whispered comfort, even as the deck shook with impacts. The Dreth came harder, hungrier. For every swarm destroyed, 2 more emerged. It seemed hopeless. Then Mira's voice thundered through the comms. "They think we are fragile. They think we surrender when crushed. Show them who we are." Her words spread like fire. Fleets rallied, soldiers roared, and even the wounded rose to fight again. But in the shadows of the council, betrayal unfolded. The envoy from Cleth whispered to the Dreth through hidden channels. "Strike the humans first. Without them, the alliance will fall." And so the swarm shifted, turning its fury on Earth. When the fleet received the signal, silence fell. Mira felt her chest tighten as Earth's image appeared. Blue oceans, white clouds, and green lands under attack. Dreth hives rained down, darkening the skies of the homeworld. Every human heart in the galaxy burned at the sight. Kane's voice shook with rage. "They want to kill our home." Mira's voice hardened like iron. "Then they've made their greatest mistake." The fleet turned toward Earth. They arrived to find the skies alive with fire. The swarm blotted out the sun, their ships like a storm of knives. Cities below screamed under bombardment. But humanity did not cower. On the ground, soldiers and civilians fought side by side. Farmers with rifles, engineers with bombs, children carrying messages through smoke-filled streets. Earth itself had risen. When the Unity descended into orbit, Mira saw it with her own eyes. The world was bleeding, but it was still standing. She whispered, "They'll never understand. Earth doesn't know how to die." The final battle began. The Alliance fleet threw everything they had into the sky. Human ships spearheaded the charge, engines burning hotter than ever. Kane led his squadron through impossible maneuvers, striking at the swarm's heart. Alvarez unleashed weapons no one had tested before, half broken, half brilliant, and watched them tear holes in the enemy lines. On the surface, Earth's people fought with a madness the Dreth could not comprehend. They did not retreat. They did not surrender. They fought in ruins, in forests, on oceans, even in space stations falling from orbit. Dr. Imani stood among the wounded, refusing to leave. Her voice carried through emergency broadcasts. "Stand, fight, every second you..." Live is another second they fail, but the Dreth hive mind was vast. It adapted, closing every gap, devouring ships, swarming cities. The Unity shuddered as its shields cracked. Kane's fighters were reduced to half. Alvarez's weapons burned out one by one. Mira stood in the command chamber, sweat running down her face. The swarm was endless. Victory seemed impossible. Then she remembered. Humanity's strength was never numbers. It was never perfection. It was defiance. "Patch me through to every ship, every soldier, every civilian," Mira ordered, her voice carried through the stars, into every heart. "They think they've seen our end. They're wrong. Humanity doesn't end. When fire burns us, we rise from ash. When darkness swallows us, we light stars. If we must fall, then we will fall screaming into their teeth. Unbroken, unyielding." Her words ignited the galaxy. Ships that were retreating turned back. Soldiers who had dropped their weapons picked them up again. Civilians in shelters joined the fight. The Dreth had numbers. Humanity had will, and will burned brighter. At that moment, Alvarez's final weapon came online. A desperate creation, forged from scraps and alien cores. A pulse bomb tuned to the hive frequency. It could shatter the swarm, but only if delivered, into the heart of the enemy fleet. Mira's eyes locked on Kane. He grinned through blood and smoke. "Guess that's my job." "No," Mira said, her throat tight. It's suicide. Kane's smile softened. That's survival, Mira. Somebody has to make the choice, and we're human. That's what we do. Before she could answer, his fighter launched, carrying the bomb straight into the heart of the swarm. The skies erupted. A wave of white fire swept through the Dreth fleet, tearing their hive mind apart. The swarm screamed as their unity shattered. Ships crashing, hives burning, shadows dissolving into silence. The battlefield grew quiet. Earth still stood. The Alliance watched in awe. The species that had been called fragile had saved them all. Humanity had not only survived, they had changed the galaxy forever. On the scarred surface of Earth, Mira looked at the sky, still glowing with fire and steel. Her voice was soft, but it carried like thunder. They thought our story was over, but humanity's story has only just begun.